The job of the blender is to combine these elements in such a way as to produce an overall flavour.
A wider repertoire of different beverages than ever before.
I think one of the most interesting breweries, and certainly one of the most interesting origin stories for a brewery in Australia.
Single malts, blends, grain whiskies, bourbons and more.
If you want mezcal to be sold around the world, then unfortunately you're going to have to make a compromise.
This is the Drinks Adventures podcast. I'm James Atkinson, and this is the show where I speak to some of the world's most exciting producers of beer, wine and spirits and uncover trends and issues in the drinks industry today. You're probably already familiar with Matthew Jukes, one of Britain's leading wine writers.
Cabernet tends to be the sort of Errol Flynn of the grape varieties.
But if you missed Matthew's brilliant masterclass on Australian Shiraz Cabernet blends, stop what you're doing and go back to Season 4 of the Drinks Adventures podcast. Matthew's back with us to share with you his new non-alcoholic drink brand, Jukes Cordialities, which he's recently launched into Australia. The market has been inundated with non-alcoholic wines in recent years. But Matthew says he's yet to find one that's drinkable, and I'd have to concur with him on that assessment, to be honest. With Jukes, he set about mimicking the experience of drinking a fine wine in the form of what are essentially deluxe adult cordials, designed for mixing with still or sparkling water. Matthew sent me some to try, and I have to say, they really are astonishingly good. I'm currently having a little break from alcohol myself, and this is by far the best alternative that I've found to a glass of wine at the end of the day. In fact, I've already been out and purchased a box of Jukes 6, my favourite of the collection. I'm not being paid anything to tell you this, I'm just giving you my honest opinion because I really was impressed with these products. They're not cheap, but neither is a decent bottle of wine. And when Matthew explains the ingredients and craftsmanship involved, the premium pricing is understandable. There's a link in the show notes you can click to purchase Jukes Cordialities online if you're interested in trying them for yourself. Later on in this interview, Matthew reveals the pandemic upheaval currently affecting Australian winemakers in the UK. This latest misfortune comes after the Chinese tariffs on Australian wine. The industry really can't catch a break at the moment. Welcome to Season 12 of the Drinks Adventures podcast. New episodes should be dropping every Tuesday, and hopefully also Thursday some weeks too. Wherever you are, I hope 2022 is treating you well. Well, Matthew Jukes, thanks so much for joining us on the Drinks Adventures podcast.
It's nice to see you, James.
Maybe take me back to, the first time you kind of conceived the idea of Jukes Cordialities. When was that, and what was the initial idea? Has it kind of evolved since then?
It was a long time ago. It was over 5 years ago, even though we've only been in business as such for 2 years. The sort of, I suppose, the seed that germinated in my brain was I was in New York doing a series of wine dinners. And I sat next to a very fascinating lady called Sally Singer, who was at the time the boss of Vogue magazine.com. So she was very obviously active in her métier and super busy. And it was a midweek dinner. And I said, "Oh, lovely to meet you." And I said, "Here's a glass of wine." She said, "Look, I'll just have a small one." And I said, "Hang on a sec, you're coming to one of my wine dinners. Surely you're going to have a large one." And she said, "No, I've just sort of given up drinking during the week." And I thought, ooh, that's a little bit doom and gloom. And she said, "No, not really. In the fashion world, I'm offered a glass of Smarty Pants champagne everywhere I go, from, first thing in the morning until last thing at night." And I thought, well, actually, that's a little bit like the wine business. You're always having glasses of wine thrust into your hand. And I thought about myself and realized that I just don't drink as much as everyone thinks I do. Of course, I'm tasting every day. I'm tasting, thousands of wines. But actually sitting down and glugging a few bottles, it really does happen generally at the weekends. And this sort of felt a little bit unusual. I remember the heady days of the 80s and 90s in the English wine trade where we wouldn't stop drinking all day. But things have changed.
But so this has been a development in your later life as you've matured and you've got kids, obviously, now.
Mate, as you know, I've got 2 small children, but I have 2 much older children too. So I'm way past the 50-year mark. And I think mature is a very kind expression to use. But no, I mean, look, I think that's part of it, but it's actually to do with more of the the professionalism that's invaded everyone's lives, how busy we all are, how many meetings we try to cram into the day. And I'm not alone in, as a journalist and as a wine taster in feeling like that. And certainly I know my friends who are in the banking world or insurance or whatever are working late into the night. And you just can't do that on a few glasses of wine. Everyone's getting up earlier in the morning, and even some people are jogging and doing exercise. I don't count myself in that group. But no, I mean, life's changed. And it's going to keep changing. I see this as a gradual, never-ending change. And so I just thought, this is bonkers. I'm out at restaurants at lunchtime and turning down a glass of wine and then sitting there with a bottle of water. It's just not delicious. Doesn't go with the food. Whilst it's not alcoholic and it's kind of inexpensive, it's not really doing an awful lot for me. And if I looked at the alternatives at the time, and we go back, a few years, obviously the market has become quite crowded all of a sudden. But 5 years ago, you were offered a can of Coke or a fruit juice or, heaven forbid, a mocktail, which is just, a hideous creation. And all of the other sort of hybrid bits and pieces besides. And most of those things are pretty disgusting, quite sugary, quite bad for you, and no good with food. So I would always say no. But actually, when you stop and stand there and think, gosh, what is out there? There's nothing. And that was the moment. So I just said to a great friend of mine, American friend of mine, Jack Holohan, who's an ex-banker, travels the world, and felt exactly the same way as me. I said, look, I'm going to solve this problem. And then I realized what I'd said and thought, how the hell am I going to do it? And that's when the cheating, let's call it, everyone else calls it research, but I think it's cheating, started. And by the word cheating, I mean looking on the internet at things that have happened in the past, because great ideas have always happened before. It's just the sort of iteration of them in the modern day that is exciting. And I found a recipe called a haymaker's punch, which was from the 1700s. A haymaker's punch. Yeah, it literally is a haymaker, a haymaking person, the punch that they would drink during the day when they're at work. And I thought, well, that sounds beautiful for a start. I don't care what it tastes like.
Haymaker's a boxing term.
Yeah, it's a boxing term as well. For a mat.
Is that related or
no? Well, I imagine the punch bit, maybe that helped it, come together. But actually, originally, of course, it's a rudimentary cordial made by macerating the leftovers from your kitchen table in vinegar, apple cider vinegar that you would have from your own apple trees and the own cider that you would drink, tricked up with a bit of honey and just sort of put through a cloth. And there you have a beautiful little cordial made of apple cores and skins and ugly bits of fruit and veg and all the leftovers that you just wouldn't want to put to waste. And because the vinegar would keep it completely fit and tidy with no refrigeration for as long as you wanted, it would protect it. It's packed full of vitamins and minerals and all sorts of goodies. And it's super refreshing. So I just thought, this sounds heaven. So I ran down to my local supermarket, grabbed the ingredients and made one in my kitchen. It took half an hour. And I can tell you that it was the best. We have Ribena over here. Do you have Ribena in Australia? Yeah. So it was the best Ribena I've ever tasted in my life. And I made it in 20 minutes. It cost more than Ribena because I bought lovely blackberries and strawberries and, from a proper supermarket. So the fruit was very ripe and everything. It wasn't made from leftovers like the old haymaker's punch. But it tasted spectacular, and it was refreshing, and it was a bit sugary, a bit simple. But that was, if I could do that in 20 minutes in my kitchen, what could I do spending a year and using people much smarter than me to do the actual kind of serious blending and serious kind of scientific side of things? And that's what I did. I set out on a path to make what ends up being called Jukes 6, the dark red cordial that we have. And it literally took making 200 single note versions, finding the right vinegar. In the end, we went to just outside of Milan, got some organic apple cider vinegar from there that's absolutely heavenly and very delicate. And we ship it over from Italy using the same fruit, veg, herbs, spices, flowers, merchants that you see supplying the best restaurants in London. And I devise some special equipment in which we make the drinks, stainless steel equipment that's sort of been made to my specifications. I built a huge, basically, kitchen, found a few pretty smart chefs, and we set about chopping up fruit, veg, herbs, spices, and flowers, macerating them in this beautiful Italian vinegar, and then adding a small amount of sugar, because, of course, in my research, I found as I reduced the level of sugar, the drink became more and more adult and more refreshing and more sort of wine shaped, let's say. And we ended up at the finish line, and I did the stats on Jukes 6, which is the richest and most full-bodied of the drinks, and it's 17 calories for a glass. So you look at that and you go, bloody hell, that's a sixth of a glass of red wine, which is extraordinary. So it's good for you. It's got apple cider vinegar in it. It's low in calories, low in sugar. Tastes pretty good, I think, and is a worthy substitute, let's say, for a glass of wine. If you're looking to dodge a glass of wine, or if you're looking to combine it with delicious food, if you're looking to stay fit and trim, keep on the sort of on point, if you've got meetings, if you're driving, if you're pregnant, if you're religious, all those other reasons for not drinking. And you'll probably gather from this story that I didn't design this drink for teetotal people. This was designed for drinkers, for people who love indulging in wine, particularly my skill, and also in all sorts of other drinks, because you can mix Jukes with tonic water and create an incredible cocktail feeling drink that, again, is more complex than you could make if you were given half an hour in a bar, because there are upwards of 20 ingredients in each little bottle. So that was how it all happened. I mean, there are so many stories about the packaging, the design, the collaborators that I have that I'm very lucky to work with. But I suppose for me, and you know a little bit about my my wine writing, this was the first time in my life I've ever made anything. And I'm used to being the person who critiques and or recommends wines that have taken individuals a minimum of a year, and sometimes 5 years or even 10 years in the case of sparkling wine to make. And I'll stick it in my gob, sniff it, spit it out, and make a judgment in 10 or 20 seconds. And now the whole world has changed around, and I'm spending weeks and months and years making drinks and understanding the effort that goes into making anything, to put it frankly, anything in the world, let alone hopefully something as sophisticated and as upmarket, let's say, as these drinks, because the intended consumer is people like you and me, but also all the 3-star Michelin, 2-star Michelin, 1-star Michelin, top wine bars, spas, hotels, all those sort of really smarty pants venues where not everybody drinks wine. It's just a fact. And those poor people have got beautiful food in front of them, and all they're given is a bottle of water. That's it.
Yeah, and look, if you sort of conceived the idea 5 years ago, then you were a bit ahead of your time. You must have been kind of watching the market move during that time, and by 2 years ago thinking, gee, I better get this thing out before someone thinks of something similar.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We're in a weird space of our own with this sort of wine-shaped vinegar-based drink. There are other vinegar drinks out there. America has a plethora of them, particularly under the umbrella shrub or switchel. And these are basically derivations of the original Haymaker's Punch, which obviously went across the pond on boats. So a lot of people drank these Haymaker's Punches, whatever they want to call it, on ships because they wouldn't spoil. And of course, fresh fruit and veg would spoil very quickly. And so this style of drink made it to America very quickly and then was never really dropped. It's always been a sort of favorite, and families would make their own, recipe, and people would love to taste each other's versions, etc., etc. And yet they are quite vinegar pronounced. They're not made using a very gentle organic apple cider vinegar like I use. They almost have very strident vinegars. They're not used They don't use masses of different ingredients. They're not trying to layer complexity. They're trying to give you impact. And so they're often one or two really pungent ingredients that set out to sort of make a fuss on the palate, make some noise. And they're not designed to go with food. What they are seen as, certainly in the US, is they're seen as moderately medicinal ways of taking apple cider vinegar, which millions of people do every day, at the same time as being an ingredient when you make a cocktail. So like a super cool ingredient that adds a je ne sais quoi to a spirit and a fruit juice and some ice, let's say. And so that's the history of those sort of styles of drink. And of course, I'm not really anywhere near that flavor. And then I think the expansion in alcohol-free drinks that's really happened since we've been working on Jukes is really quite clever and nifty beers, really impressive beers. So can you taste the difference type beers? I mean, that's really serious work done by the brewing fraternity. And whilst I'm not a massive beer drinker, I've certainly tasted enough to go, wow, that's great. And then the wine side of things has been an unmitigated disaster because, of course, when you strip out alcohol from wine, you strip out the backbone because alcohol is literally the structure from which all of the fruit flavors are hung. And when you strip it out, you've got to replace it with something. And, of course, sugar goes in to replace it, which defeats the object. You end up with a gloopy, syrupy, confected mess. And I write about wine and have written about wine for over 30 years. And I've never written up a non-alcoholic wine in my life, even though I'm begged to by my Daily Mail editor. But sod that, I'm not doing that.
You haven't found one you liked, is that what you're saying?
No, absolutely not, no. The other category is, of course, the faux gins and the faux spirits, which are basically quite clever distilled water. And I'm not sure I can countenance the price that people are charging for those drinks, given that in a bottle of gin in the UK, the duty charge is 11 or 12 pounds in a bottle. And in a bottle of non-alcoholic gin or vodka, it's priced at the same as a bottle of alcoholic gin or vodka. That 10 or 12 pounds that is in there is kept as profit as opposed to given to the government as a duty levy. Wow, that makes it an expensive drink for the ingredients. So I don't understand that. So yeah, that's my cynicism about some of the sectors, but I fully applaud the beer people for doing the great job that they're doing.
You must have watched with interest, though. We had Mark Livings, who's one of the founders of Liar's non-alcoholic spirits, on the show at the end of last year, and their latest capital raising valued the business at 500 million Australian.
Absolutely.
And they started a few kilometres away from where I'm sitting now a couple of years ago, about the same time as you would have gone to market.
Yeah, the Liar's people have made an impact globally, which is remarkable in such a short space of time. And also, the product looks really smart. I'm sure they'll take that compliment, because it's so difficult to have unique packaging these days and have something that's eye-catching, not least, and this is where in a bar atmosphere now I'm talking as opposed to a restaurant, but when you see the backdrop of a bar and you spot all of those various bottles and things, and if Liar's can stand out in the way that it does in an extremely crowded marketplace of all types of spirits, whether they're alcohol-free or not, they've done a great job. And then it comes down to taste, because ultimately everything comes down to taste, certainly in our world, because that's what we're bothered about. And the Liar's drinks taste really intriguing and dare I say it, complex. So great effort to them.
You kind of mentioned about the process that's gone into actually making these drinks. So you're still using real, I mean, I know it's all natural, but you're actually starting with whole fruit and botanicals and working from there rather than sort of buying in these natural flavours from a flavour house or something like that.
That is absolutely repellent to me, that idea. I've literally scaled up what I did in my kitchen. That is it. And as I say, I found a Victorian railway arch. We now have two of them in Battersea, not far from where I'm sitting, in London. And it was a huge beautiful arch. I mean, an extraordinary building. But it was a clean slate, and I could put into it what I wanted. And so I put a fridge and a freezer. And then the rest of the space is just a massive kitchen. And in that kitchen is a double sink, a load of chopping boards and knives, and nothing else. There is no Bunsen burner, no reverse osmosis machine, no spinning cones, no wizardry, no science. It's literally chefs. Our head of production is Melania Borgia, an Italian lady who used to be a master pasta maker. And then all of the other employees who work in the arch are chefs by trade. So no drinks people really, because their job is to receive whole cucumbers, whole melons, whole apples, whole fruits and veg. I mean, the beetroot, I can't give away too many ingredients because they're secret, but I mean, but we have over 150 ingredients that we use across the 5 different flavors that we currently make. And they're received whole. There is no puree, there's no essences or tinctures or eyedroppers of mysterious liquid. It is all made in what we rather poncily called the Jukes method, because
method Jukes.
Yeah, Jukes. Yeah. It's just, and it's a real pain in the arse method because it requires starting from scratch. So I'm not thanked for that, but what it means is that we have extraordinary control over what we're doing. So, for example, in the case of a cucumber, a simple cucumber, the exterior skin, the dark skin, is for me the most interesting bit. I mean, clearly there's no dish that's ever been made of just cucumber skin. That would be preposterous. That's not the most delicious and crowd-pleasing part of a cucumber. But for me, it's the most interesting part. The crunchy bit underneath is super useful and slippery and very valuable particularly in our white drinks. But the pappy, watery mush in the middle, down the center of the cucumber, is completely useless. So a chef can cut and slice and dice a cucumber how I wish, get rid of the middle of the cucumber and do it exactly right at exactly the right size, such that during the maceration period, along with all of the other ingredients that it's sort of nestling next to, will bleed out its perfume, color, and flavor to my specifications. And of course, each ingredient has to do that for the same length of time. I don't macerate everything individually, otherwise we'd have to have, several hundred different containers on the go at the same time, which would be impractical. So the skill was, and the reason why it took me so long to design Jukes 6 in the first place, was to figure out how to make everything end at the finish line at the same time and in harmony. And that is really, really difficult.
What you've just explained, I'm kind of understanding a little bit more about the sort of value that is in the product that you're selling. Because the price point will be a barrier for some people, I would think. The exchange rate plays a part, probably for us in Australia too.
Yeah, I mean, in the UK, I think you're about, is it $90 for a box?
95, I think.
Yeah. So, and there are 9 bottles, so that's easy to do the maths. In the UK, we're about 40. So about, £4. I think the exchange rate's about 2 to 1. It's always around about that. So it's near enough. But let me tell you that we've sold many, many, many bottles, and no one has ever brought up the subject of price ever. And that's, of course, after they think, bloody hell, that's a lot to pay for a box of, I can't even see inside the box. I don't know what's going to happen. I've read someone says it's all right, but let's have a go. Then, of course, it's all about the taste and the experience and hopefully some of the theatre of having your own little bottle that has 2 drinks in it that you prepare your way, your bespoke drink that is peculiar to you. The water that you choose to dilute it with is up to you, whether it's still, sparkling or tonic. The dilution rate is up to you, whether you use 1 bottle in a very, very, very long drink or whether you split it in 2 in a wine glass and treat it like a wine and throw it around the glass and play with it. And I think that ritual is lacking in a lot of life these days. You know how revered the sort of tea drinking is in China and actually tea drinking is at the Ritz in Piccadilly in London. But lots of drinks have their own rituals, decanting a bottle of port. I mean, hurry up, mate, I'm gagging for a drink, but go slower. It's beautiful watching you do that. And is it going to taste better? It's going to taste better. I'm sure it's going to taste better. And those rituals are beautiful. And I think that we've tried to bring in a little bit of ritual to drinking my drinks.
Well, thank you for sending me some samples. And as I told you earlier, it was very well timed, and I'm very impressed with the quality. The thing I like about them is they're not trying too hard to be wines. Like, they kind of are wine-ish, but they're certainly 1,000 times better than any non-alcoholic wines I've ever tried. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Jukes 6. It's interesting that was the first one, because that's my favourite of the three that I've tried.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is the one that's more evocative of red wine than the others. But what's sort of the potential that you see for? First of all, there's 2 other flavours that I haven't seen yet. So maybe just talk through, how you've developed a range and what you kind of see as being the scope for that to expand in the future.
So what we did was I started the production kind of R&D with Jukes 6, because I knew in my mind that would, in theory, be the most difficult. How do you get a deep red coloured drink that has no grapes in it and no fermentation to have the same silhouette as a glass of wine? So the same sort of intensity of perfume, not the same perfume, of course, the same intensity of flavour and richness on the palate. You want richness. Just because you're alcohol-free, you don't want the skinny, lean, insipid drink. You want something that's indulgent and luxurious. And then, critically, length of flavour, because, as you know, the length of finish of any drink is a mark of its quality. And, of course, vinegar helps me do that. Without the vinegar, you wouldn't have that attenuated finish. And you know that to be the case, because if you took a sip of organic apple cider vinegar in your kitchen at home, that flavour would last for a long time. In fact, some people go, oh gosh, I want to wash that flavour out of my mouth. But, you'd rinse, because the flavour is pervasive. Now, actually, I try to use that to my advantage by locking onto that flavour all of these fruit, veg, herbs, spices, and flowers, notes, whether they're subtle or whether they're quite bold. And I describe it as a washing line. You just hang all these different flavors along this washing line and let it run across the palate, and it does a job like that. So that was Jukes 6. I couldn't launch with just one drink, so I devised Jukes 1 very quickly. Now, very quickly was about 3 months, but what I knew was I knew how to make the drinks then, which I didn't know before I started Jukes 6. Then it was about flavor, and of course I wanted Jukes 1 to be white, so that you have your white and your red. It was pretty kind of clear to people with my background what I was aiming for from a sort of brain kind of directional point of view. But Jukes 1 is all whites to all people. So if you think of all the tasting notes you've made about white wine in your life, you probably have never written the word grapey. I hope you haven't, because wine doesn't taste grapey. But you will have written loads of fruit notes and herb notes and spice notes, these lazy terms that we use when we're trying to describe wine to other people. And there's so few descriptors that are non sort of food based. If you gather those, if you look through your notes about Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Albrigné, Riesling, Semillon, whatever, you write down the fruit notes. What happens if you put all those fruits into vinegar and have a go? You're going to get something that's somehow vaguely reminiscent of the flavors you're after. And of course, that's what I did, and polished it until I ended up with Jukes 1. So we started with 1 and 6. That was the right place to start 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. Yeah. And then in the summer, prior to lockdown, so March 2020, the first proper big lockdown, I had already made Jukes 8 the rosé. So again, that's modelled on my favourite styles of rosé, principally Provence. Hence, there's a hell of a lot of vegetables in there and a lot of those sort of garrigue notes and salty notes that you get if you're down in the Mediterranean. And Jukes 8 was designed to go straight into all the restaurant accounts that I'd opened. So I'd opened up top 25 accounts in London very, very quickly indeed, because everyone's desperate for classy alcohol-free drinks. And Jukes 8 was all ready to go. It made 1,000 boxes, so quite a big commitment. And lockdown happened. And I thought, oh dear. And of course, everybody in the world was thinking, "Oh dear!" You know, all the restaurateurs were going, "What the hell?" You know, in our business, people were in dire straits. I found myself among them, and so we just polished up our our website, and aimed it at all sort of wine lovers and people that I'd met in my wine career, and fortunately had a huge uptake from the general public who could not get enough of Jukes 8. We sold that within about 3 weeks, and I'd made a year's worth of stock, I thought.
So is that the top selling one out of the 3?
No, but that's summer, you see, because what I did was I wrote a very cheesy tagline. You are unable to go to Provence this year, so we'll bring Provence to you. And people loved it. People loved the drink. They bought loads of it. We made tons of it, and we've just put Jukes 8 straight into the range. So then we had a white, red, and a rosé. So those were the 3 core drinks. Then in the autumn, I introduced. So then I sort of set them out as seasonal. So in the autumn, I introduced Jukes 2, which have you tasted Jukes 2?
No, I've got 1, 6, and 8, I think.
Yeah. So Jukes 2 is a very crimson coloured, I call it carmine to crimson, a crimson coloured drink, which is reflective of very high acid, really lean red wines as opposed to black fruited red wines. So Sangiovese, you know, those really pointy Dolcettos or Cabernet Francs or Pinot, kind of really sinewy, leggy Pinot, kind of stemmy, try hard Pinot. and I made that clearly using a lot of red fruit, a lot of sour cherries, a lot of cranberry, and some really unusual other bits and pieces. And that's 10 calories for a glass. So it's 1/10 of a glass of wine. And it's the leanest and meanest and most ninja-like on the palate. It's a proper adult drink. And that's gone completely crazy with the sort of bar fraternity, making alcohol-free cocktails with it, but also with Asian fusion restaurants. So the Indian Brigade are all over it. Thai, Pan-Asian sort of food, Chinese. So rich sauces, dips, Japanese, so teriyaki, soy sauce, all of these things that are massively combative in the wine world and really upset wine for a few moments. Find Jukes 2 absolutely adorable. So we've done well with that. And then last summer, so 2021, in the summer, I launched Jukes 5, which is a much lighter and more sort of green fruited white. So sort of more tangy, more kind of Sauvignon Blanc kind of shaped than Jukes 1. So now we have 2 whites, 2 reds and a rosé in the middle. And that's where we sit right now. And that is the collection of Jukes, classic Jukes for this year. I'm not launching any more surprises this year. And that's sort of secret. However, I'm launching something else this year, which is not a classic Jukes Cordiality, but you can see behind me this. That is a drink called Jukes Sparkling Pinot Noir. Now, I hope your brain is going into orbit now. That's sort of what I said I wouldn't do, because it's using Pinot Noir.
Right, okay.
And what I figured out, and I did this a year ago, was I grabbed some grape skins from a friend of mine who has an urban winery. So we're copying you Melbourneites and you Sydneyites and you Adelaideyites and probably someone in Perth as well, who, no one in Brizzy, I imagine, who make wine in an urban environment. So a chap called Sergio Varillo makes Black Book wines. He's in Arch 41. I'm in Arch 40. So he's my neighbour and he's a very good winemaker. And I grabbed some skins off him, some Pinot skins that he'd used to make sparkling base. And I just made a Jukes just from discarded, basically rubbish from leftovers. And it's a really beautiful drink. It doesn't have the complexity of Jukes Cordialities because there are upwards of 20 ingredients in those classic drinks that you've tasted. But in Jukes Sparkling Pinot Noir, I've got that haunting Pinot aroma, which people still search for in decent rosé fizz. I mean, they still can't nail that perfume. I've got it in spades. It's never fermented, so it's not wine. and I've made it into a Jukes. I've then put it into a can, shoved some water and some bubbles in, and it's a sparkling can of drink that's, get this, 17 calories for the whole can. So it's the equivalent of 2 celery sticks. And it looks and tastes and reads like a sparkling rosé. I mean, literally. It's remarkable. And that goes on the market next week. So you are the first person in the world outside of my staff who know that.
Oh, fantastic. And that's coming out here as well?
It may. I've made a fair quantity. I haven't used Sergio this year because his winery is too small. So I've used a very famous English winery. I've taken all of their Pinot skins that have been discarded after they've made their own sparkling wine. So they would have gone out to feed the pigs or to make fertilizer or whatever. They would have to pay to get them taken away. I turned up in a 7.5 ton truck and picked them up and did a lot of trips down to the countryside and back to London, and made a lot of these cans. Let's see how they go in the market. As I say, they're not on the market in the UK now. They'll please you on the price point, James. They're going to be £2.50 for a can. So pretty competitive. And so they're packaged in a four pack. This is what a 4-pack looks like, but pretty smart little box. And that'll be £10 for a box. And we'll see how we go with that. And if people like it, then I expect I'll be making this drink for a much larger audience.
Yeah, for sure. Now, presumably, since there's a Jukes 8 and there's only 5 products on the market, there must be 3 flying under the radar.
Oh dear, you've asked that question. I keep forgetting to sort of talk about this when I'm banging on about the drinks. I'm slightly weird. I know you know I'm weird, but I'm slightly weird in the respect that I kind of, I sort of listen to music in colours, and I sort of taste and personify every wine that I taste so that I can remember the person as opposed to the wine label, let's say. So I have a brain that computes and stores things quite differently. And I'm number weird. I'm number phobic a bit, really. So there are some numbers I just don't like and will never see those on any of my products. And there are others that I really love, and they are precisely the flavour that is in the bottle. So you've got the right numbers for the right taste. In my mind, nobody else's, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But in my mind, they work for me, and my name's on the can, so that's what goes.
It sounds like you're getting good demand for the cordialities that you've created so far. Do you have an ability to be able to scale this up to meet continued demand? Because it sounds like such a hands-on, small batch kind of process.
Yeah, it is small batch, but don't forget that, they're 3 centilitre bottles. So each little bottle is quite tiny and it goes a long way. And we make, relatively large quantities. And then I suppose the time-consuming thing is bottling and capping and dressing and boxing, which we do all by hand, and all at my facility. So it's a real artisan product in that regard. But think for a second that we're pretty well known in the UK. I had a lovely write up in Helen McGinn in Female in the Daily Mail yesterday. But equally, last Friday we were written up in the Washington Post. Our business in America is already bigger than the rest of the world put together, including the UK. And in addition, we're in, where are we? Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Canada, America, Australia, obviously. We've just started out with Simon Johnson, the super purveyor of fine foods, as our representative in Australia. And so we're in the Simon Johnson shops, and Simon Johnson sells to the trade. So hopefully we'll be getting into a few of the right restaurants and bars, in due course. But yeah, we have pretty big ambitions to be the alcohol-free drink of choice for those with discerning palates. I can make a lot of this. This isn't a seasonal product. in the way that wine is.
There must be seasonality with the ingredients, though. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a cool question.
You'd have to be working with the ingredients when they're at their peak, or it would make your job harder, I would have thought.
Yeah, there's wine analogies with everything that I do, simply because I only have a wine brain. And so, I think of how we make Jukes as simply as maceration. Almost if you think back to the old Henri Jaillet days in Burgundy, of him sort of coming up with the idea of pre-fermentation, cold maceration of Pinot Noir grapes before he let them start to ferment. That's kind of how I make Jukes. I use free run Jukes. I kind of adopt wine techniques in everything that I do. And of course, one of the great techniques, certainly a favorite of your heroic fortified wine producers in Australia, is the Solera system. So we're blending across batches and eliminating. I mean, doing as well as we can to eliminate seasonal variation, at the same time as having, thankfully, quite a big production facility, such that our fridge and freezer storage is pretty generous. So we can buy, and this is great because of the costs of these fruit and veg is seriously prohibitive unless you can get to a certain scale in the first place when you're purchasing. Likewise with our organic apple cider vinegar from Italy. I mean, it's extremely expensive vinegar, and it becomes, a waste of time if you're just making a handful of bottles. But if you're making thousands of bottles, then it starts to work. And so whilst we are a Heath Robinson, small artisan business, we're able to supply the world at the moment. And we could double, treble, quintuple our production with ease without having to move to a different site. And then if I tell you there are 48 railway arches where we are and we're only in 2 of them, I think we'll be all right for the foreseeable, unless things go crazy. but yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying the rate of pace. As soon as the stock arrived in Australia, we had an order for another 2 pallets. That we can cope with that. That's fabulous. Yeah, keep that coming. And in the Middle East, the same thing is happening. And in America, the same thing is happening. We've shipped nearly 100 pallets to America in under 18 months. And it's absolutely extraordinary, the rate at which the Americans are loving Jukes. And we can continue. Hopefully you'll be buying some because you're so in love with the product yourself, James.
I will be, absolutely. Yeah, you got me at a weak moment, not drinking, so it's good timing.
Oh, good.
You must obviously have other investors that are involved. I've seen your likeness on the side of buses in London on your social media, and that stuff doesn't come cheap. So how did you kind of raise the capital to take the business forward?
Yeah, well, I mentioned my friend Jack Holohan, who is my founding partner. He's from the banking world, so he's extremely well connected, and he's sort of, let's say he's semi-retired. He's never really retired, but he's not a banker anymore, and he's very excited about startups and investing in interesting products. Quite a diverse portfolio of things that he's done in his life, and his main job, of course, is working with me with Jukes, as is it's requiring an enormous amount of my time, even though I do all of my wine writing duties on the side. Jukes is very much the driving force of my every day these days. But in addition to that, we phoned up friends and family, the old friends and family line. And, both of our sets of friends and both of our families have invested, and we haven't had to go out to any institutions yet. And just in September, we launched a crowdfunding exercise and encouraged a whole load of smaller investors and people who were already fans of Jukes to invest smaller amounts. And that dragged in a few more people from around the world. Some people in the East, some other more people in America who are interested in this segment. But we're lucky that we haven't had to, go to anyone who's got expensive money. We've gone to sort of very much friends, very much people who are invested in the product themselves. Some of our investors work within the business as well, consulting. So Jay and Ed, Barbara Osgoby, who are our creative designers, the creative force between how Jukes looks and the boxes and stuff, they're shareholders as well. We have some ex-advertising execs, pretty pretty clever chaps who I'm extremely excited to even know, let alone work with, who help us with our creative voice, which is you've seen on the side of buses and some of our adverts in the UK. I think are pretty clever and pretty eye catching and quite subtle and quite wry. And I think that appeals to our audience. And as much as I think I can write, I certainly can't do anything like the level of copy that they churn out. So I've just got a great number of people around me.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. It's a really exciting project, and it's certainly been a great thing for me to have around the last few weeks when I'm missing wine. Well, I've got you there before we were recording. You were telling me that Australian wine is having a bit of a tough time over in the UK at the moment. What's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's tough everywhere. And of course, Australia's got larger problems than the UK on its doorstep. But nothing's insurmountable, and you've got so many fans around the world. I mean, obviously, I'm the fully paid up member of the Aussie Wine Fan Club, but I think the problem is slightly deeper, but also solvable, and that is that travel is so difficult at the moment. So that's travel for me going to Australia. I haven't been to Australia for a very, very long time. And that prevents me from tasting new releases unless, of course, you post me a bottle. So that holds up information flow. And that's the same for all wine fans around the world who have been used to going to Australia once, twice, 3 times a year to do the research and get the tasting done and then spread the word. So that's sort of ground to a halt. And that's a problem for you guys. And that's obviously not a problem that has been experienced at the same level by the French or the Italians or the Spanish or the Germans or whatever, because I've been able to nip over in between lockdowns and with, fewer travel impediments. So I've kept up my dialogue with those European countries, relatively easily. But Australia, it's been sort of difficult. And the other side of it, and it's something that I talk about a hell of a lot, is Aussies coming over here. You are the best salespeople for your wines on the planet because you're the people that make them. And I haven't seen an Aussie winemaker in the UK since this whole thing kicked off in early 2020. And that naturally, you can understand that enthusiasm, that generosity, all the Aussie traits under the sun, enthusiasm, generosity, skill, the gregarious nature, the ability to make people listen and explain and love you in a very, very short space of time. Backed up by epic product, just hasn't happened. And so what we're doing is we've just got this information void, and I think that's a problem. Now, of course, I've still been tasting because I'm fortunate enough in my position as a sort of national wine writer to get sent samples all the time. So I'm not complaining about me so much. I'm still lucky enough to be up to date with the wines themselves, but I'm missing Australia greatly. And you all need to know that we are missing Australia. And I think that's generally the problem.
When you actually talk about how Australian wine would be feeling the impacts over there, is that kind of anecdotal or like speaking to wineries or, have you seen sales figures or what are you sort of basing that on?
I'm basing it on all of those things. So you can naturally see that when restaurants have been in turmoil and have their doors shut, then they open their doors. Of course, they're going to sell their inventory. Don't have any money to buy new stock. And then, of course, they're going to sell what they've got in the cellar. And then if that sells out, they're going to start to reload with products that are easy to get hold of, products that they know that their customers enjoy, and products that are readily available. That isn't going to be esoteric fine wine from Australia. That's just going to be easy European stuff. The list will be shortened.
It would take too long to get over there, wouldn't it?
It's just too difficult. And so that, again, it's that clogging up of the mechanism of doing business has been problematic for the on-trade. The off-trade, we've had extraordinary enthusiasm from online retailers who haven't got any bricks and mortar to worry about or staff to worry about as such, and the COVID rules breaking their method of doing business. If you're online retailing, you're happy as Larry. But what you're going to do is you're just going to try and sell wines that you can get easily again. So stuff that can arrive fairly quickly, stuff that's eye-catching, et cetera, et cetera. And the wines that require a bit more explanation, or perhaps pushing people out of their comfort zone, so getting people to spend up, 15 quid, 20 quid or more, which is where Australia really sets the world on fire, in my opinion, is too difficult, and then you lose staff, then you have to retrain. And if you retrain a member of wine staff, how many years does that take to get up to speed? So likewise, a member of restaurant staff. We've lost so many restaurant staff who would have known their wine lists inside out. And then you're having to train people about how to use a coffee machine from scratch, let alone what the difference between Eden Valley and Clare Valley Riesling is. So I think that places like Australia have disproportionately hit, particularly in the fine wine. When I use fine wine as just basically small, boutique or small domain wines, don't have to be expensive wines, but those wines which are interesting. I think they've been hit badly.
Through no fault of our own, really, it sounds like.
Exactly right. And in actual fact, behind the scenes, you got the quality of your wines improves year on year. It's a fact. It's an absolute fact. I drank, just to give you an example and a shout out, Stephanie Toole's Mount Horrocks Riesling the other day, Watervale Riesling, 2021 vintage. So first time I saw it was beginning of January. So you guys will have seen it for months before that. It stopped me in my tracks. Absolutely, it's best dry Riesling she's ever made, in my opinion. Gave it a massive score on my notes. Can't wait to talk about it, and can't wait to for the restaurants to list it. When will that be? When will it get into the independent wine shop so I can give it a write up? That's all just going to be slow. It's going to be slow, and therefore, no matter how delicious the wine is, it's not going to zip onto the market and zip through and sell through like it would have done a few years ago.
What about for the likes of Penfolds? Because from what I can see on social media, they've been pretty active over there with their promotional efforts.
Yeah, but I mean, they're one of the most sophisticated companies in the world when it comes to spreading the word about their wines. And they're also very, again, it's an Aussie trait, very generous with samples, with their expensive wines. They want everyone to taste them. They don't just think that, people are going to buy them if they can't taste them. It's actually quite a laudable trait of Australian premium, super premium wine producers, is that they're happy to open bottles. That doesn't happen with the Super Tuscan Brigade or the big Bordeaux boys or the big Burgundy boys. They just want you to buy it on a recommendation or on a score, which is preposterous, of course. But you guys, you'll make the effort. You'll send the stock over. You'll arrange the Zooms. You'll get it. You'll get people on side, and you'll share the wines. And that's actually, I suppose, at the bottom in the supermarkets, at the top with the super premiums, things have probably been all right. But it's just the interesting bit of Australia is that middle ground. What you and I drink of an evening. That's the interesting part of Australia. And I think it's been kicked in the nuts a bit, to be honest.
And obviously we haven't had a Great Australian Red competition over here must have been since 2019, I would assume, and probably won't be one this year either, I would guess.
No, it's soul destroying. You think that, the anniversary, what we're 17, Tyson Stelzer and I 17 years into this thing, and the last 2.5 have not happened.
And you were probably really starting to get recognition and traction with the idea. So
yeah, I mean, I can see that the halo of the competition and the term, the Great Australian Red, is being used a hell of a lot these days, which is great. Associating that term with that Cabernet Shiraz blend is fabulous, which is, I think, what it should be called internationally to try and shine a spotlight on this style. But I'm gutted that I can't come out and host the competition because it's one of the great days of my year. I'm gutted for the producers and making fabulous versions that aren't pitted head to head to see who wins each, trophy, etc. And I can assure you that as soon as you relax your bloody rules, I'll be back because I'm desperate to get on a plane.
Well, fingers crossed 2023. Well, Matthew, been a fascinating chat as I expected it would be, and congratulations again on Jukes, and thanks heaps for the chat.
Thank you, James. It's great to talk to you. Lovely to talk to you and see you. I know that this sort of technology allows us to do these things, thank God, otherwise we'd be really missing you guys. Love to everybody out there, and keep drinking the Jukes.
The Drinks Adventures podcast is produced by me, James Atkinson, with additional production and mixing by Dave Robertson. You can find complete transcripts, links and other information on the show at drinksadventures.com.au. You can follow me on all social media platforms at by James Atkinson. Like my Facebook page, James Atkinson Drinks Adventures, to be kept informed of podcast giveaways and other news about the show. The Drinks Adventures podcast needs your support as listeners. Please do us a favour and leave an honest review and rating for the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps inform other people this is a show worth listening to. Or simply drop us a line at hello@drinksadventures.com.au.